The sun dipped low across the flatlands near Dry Arrow Ridge, casting a crimson sheen over the dust and brittle sage. The light was strange that hour, too honest. It made even the roughest souls look like saints carved from fire and gold. Wade Collier shifted in the saddle, lowering his hat against the blaze. His mare, Hazel, gave a restless snort. She felt it, too, the way the silence hung heavy. Not the kind that calms a man's bones, but the kind that presses on your back, like something unseen's breathing down your neck. He hadn't stayed anywhere more than a week since spring. Just a man with no place left to belong and too many ghosts for company. Folks in the last town barely spoke to him, just watched from windows and porches like they were afraid he might vanish if they looked too long. Wade Collier, a name whispered like smoke, a gunman who disappeared from the stories, only to walk back in when no one wanted him to. A call from above drew his gaze toward the creek bed below. Something was caught in the brush, a faded scrap of cloth. He thought at first, but then it moved, just enough to catch the dying sun. He was off his horse in one breath. Hazel stamped her hooves behind him, nervous. Wade's boots landed quiet on the dry earth. The air smelled of mesquite and warning. The figure crumpled on the ground was small. A woman, young, maybe even a girl. Long black hair tangled with dirt and dried blood. Her dress torn at the side where a sharp wound cut across her ribs. She looked like she'd been dropped by a storm. He knelt carefully. Her skin burned under his fingertips. Fever already taking hold. She stirred faintly, murmuring in a language he couldn't follow. "You're not gone," he murmured, voice like sandpaper. "But you're not far from it." He pulled a clean cloth from his saddle roll, pressing it gently to her side. Her breath came thin and slow, but steady enough to keep him moving. Wade looked back toward the ridges, knowing well what it might mean to be found like this. A white man crouched over an injured native woman in contested land. But he didn't walk away. Instead, he gathered her in his arms. She was light, frighteningly so, and didn't stir as he lifted her to the saddle. He mounted, keeping her close, and urged Hazel toward the canyon hollow where he'd camped the night before. Each mile felt watched. Every ridge a place an arrow could fly from. But no shot came. By the time they reached camp, the stars had crept into the sky, cold and patient. He laid her gently on a bed of blankets and stoked a fire low and slow. Water from the canteen cooled her brow. A thin line of blood still seeped from her side, but he cleaned it as best he could. In the glow of firelight, her features sharpened. Strong cheekbones, sun-warmed skin, and a necklace of carved beads tucked beneath her collarbone. Even in sleep, she looked like someone who'd never bowed her head in fear. A hawk brought down, but not broken. Wade leaned back on his heels. "What happened to you?" he asked the fire. "And what storm followed you here?" She didn't answer, not that night. Wade kept watch with his rifle across his knees, one eye on the fire and the other on the dark, like he had 1,000 times before. Always the same questions. Always waiting for the ones he couldn't outrun. Morning brought movement. Not much. Just a flutter of breath, a tightening of fingers in the blanket. Her eyes opened slowly. Golden, sharp, and wary. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice ragged. "Safe enough," Wade replied. "I found you down by the creek. You were bleeding. Figured you prefer a fire to the coyotes." She blinked slowly, gaze scanning him. "Why did you help?" Wade paused. Didn't sit right, walking past. She shifted, pain dragging across her features. He moved instinctively to steady her, but she jerked back with a hiss. "Don't touch me." He raised both hands, staying still. No harm meant. She clutched the blanket tighter, her jaw set. "What do I call you?" he asked, quiet. A moment passed. "Ayasha," she said. "It means little one of the wind." Wade gave a faint nod. "Fitting. You speak Apache?" Just enough to get corrected. There was the briefest flicker in her eyes. Not trust, but something softer than fear. Days passed. She barely spoke. Ate little, drank less. She watched him like a caged fox, waiting for the trap to spring. Wade didn't push. He hunted, cleaned her wounds, gave her space. She never thanked him, and he never asked for it. On the third night, rain broke over the canyon, sudden and heavy. Thunder rolled overhead like distant cannon fire. Ayasha trembled beneath the blankets. Wade waited a long moment, then took off his coat and laid it gently over her. "Not trying to get close," he said quietly. "Just don't want you turning to ice." This time, she didn't flinch. She let the warmth settle over her shoulders. The next morning, before the fire even crackled, Wade felt it. Hoofbeats. Not a few. Many. Ayasha sat upright, color draining from her face. "My people," she whispered. "You must go." "I'm staying." "They'll kill you." He checked the rifle beside him, knowing it wouldn't mean much against a full war party. Still, he said, "Let them try." She looked at him like she didn't understand. Or maybe she did, and didn't want to. Then came the riders. 30 or more, ghosts against the morning light. War paint on faces. Feathers dancing in the wind. They formed a silent circle around the camp. At the front rode a tall man with the kind of stillness that demanded respect. He dismounted without a word and approached Wade slowly. "You brought her back?" he asked, his voice deep and level. Wade nodded. "I did." The man's gaze lingered on his face, searching. "By our tradition," he said finally, "she belongs to you." Wade's face hardened. "I didn't carry her from the dirt to claim her." "It's not a claim," the chief replied. "It's a bond, one born from life saved." He turned to Ayasha and spoke in their language. She listened, eyes flickering with uncertainty. Then she turned to Wade. "Do you want this?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. Wade breathed in deep. A stillness settled in his chest for the first time in years. The chief placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are family now. Guard her well, or we'll return." Without another word, the riders faded back into the wild. As the fire crackled low again, Ayasha leaned against him. "You smell like wood smoke," she whispered. "And you smell like lightning," Wade said, letting out a soft laugh. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. That night, as she slept curled in his coat, Wade looked up at the sky. The stars still blinked cold and far, but the weight in his chest had shifted. Not gone, but no longer crushing. He wasn't saved. Neither was she. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't lost anymore. The fire had long since faded to ash when Wade opened his eyes. Ayasha was still beside him, her breath warm against the fabric of his coat, her brow calm for the first time since he'd found her. But something in the wind had changed. The silence was back, the heavy kind, where every rustle felt like a warning. Hazel raised her head near the edge of the camp, ears twitching. Wade rose quietly, grabbing his rifle, not because he expected to shoot, but because old habits die hard. He walked to the edge of the canyon and scanned the horizon. It was empty, too empty. The birds had stopped singing. Even the insects had gone still. Behind him, Ayasha stirred. She sat up slowly, eyes already sharp. "You feel it too," she said. Wade nodded. "Something's coming. Not your people, though something else." Ayasha wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, rising carefully. Her ribs still pained her, but the fire in her eyes had returned. "My village lies a day's ride from here," she said. "We can reach it if we leave before noon. You think it's safer there?" She gave him a look that said more than words could. "Safer than what's coming behind us." Wade packed quickly. They rode with urgency. Ayasha sitting in front of him in the saddle, her head resting lightly against his chest. The trail was narrow, winding through red rock and tall scrub, shadows playing tricks in the corners of Wade's vision. By dusk, they reached a rise that overlooked a wide basin. Smoke curled from distant huts tucked against the cliffside. "That's it?" Wade asked. She nodded. "That's home." They descended slowly, Wade's shoulders tight, eyes scanning every movement. But no one came out to greet them. No children playing in the dirt. No elders watching from shaded corners. The village was too still. Ayasha dismounted first. "Something's wrong." Wade stepped down beside her, hand resting on his revolver. "Let's be careful." They moved through the village like ghosts. Fires still smoldered in pits. Blankets fluttered in doorways. but no voices. Then came the smell, faint but unmistakable. Smoke, metal, and fear. Ayasha darted toward the largest dwelling near the cliff wall. She threw the hide, covering aside. Inside, an old woman stirred from a corner. Her face was lined like weathered bark, her hands trembling. "Grandmother," Ayasha breathed. The woman looked up, and her eyes filled with tears. She spoke in Apache, voice cracked from days without water. Ayasha fell to her knees. They spoke rapidly, her tone growing tighter with every sentence. "What is it?" Wade asked when she turned back to him. She swallowed hard. A group of traders passed through, white men with wagons and rifles. They claimed peace, but they came at night, took 3 of our women, killed 2 men. Wade's jaw tightened. When? 2 days ago. And they're heading where? South, toward Fort Kingsley. Wade ran a hand over his face. That was cavalry territory, where law and greed rode in the same saddle. "Then we ride at first light," he said. Ayasha's gaze didn't waver. "I ride, too. Your ribs aren't healed. I won't stay behind." He didn't argue. He just nodded. They left before dawn, tracking wagon ruts through dry brush and brittle stone. Wade followed the signs like he'd done 100 times before. Hoof prints, broken branches, ashes from cold fires. They found the first trail marker by mid-morning. A strip of blue cloth snagged on a mesquite thorn. Ayasha touched it gently, her jaw set. They're close. By sunset, they reached the edge of a bluff. Below, campfires dotted the valley floor. 5 wagons, half a dozen riders. Wade crouched beside Ayasha. "You sure this is them?" She nodded. "That woman by the fire. Her name is Sunita. She braided my hair when I was little." Wade studied the layout. "We wait until second watch. Most men will be asleep. And then we walk in the fire and take back what's ours." The moon was high when they moved. Wade crept through the brush like a shadow. Ayasha followed, her steps careful, silent. They reached the edge of the camp where a thin man sat nodding over his rifle. Wade tapped the barrel of his own rifle against the man's temple. "Don't." The man froze, eyes wide, and dropped his weapon. Wade tied his hands and left him the brush. They moved quickly after that. Ayasha found Sunita and 2 other women bound beneath a wagon, bruised but alive. She whispered reassurances as Wade stood guard. But nothing goes smooth in this world. A shout rang out from the far side. One of the men had woken early. Wade raised his rifle. "Go!" Ayasha urged the women toward the brush. A shot cracked through the air. Then another. Wade fired once, dropping a man near the fire. The rest scrambled, shouting, but too late. Ayasha had already vanished into the dark with her kin. Wade backed toward the ridge, rifle ready, until he heard the sound of hooves in the distance. His heart dropped. Riders. But as the first horse cleared the rise, he saw the war paint. Ayasha's people had come. A silent charge swept down the hill. The raiders scattered like dry leaves in wind. Wade stood still, rifle at his side, as the warriors rode past him. One paused. It was the same chief who'd named Wade family. He gave a single nod. By dawn, the valley was empty. Wade found Ayasha by the edge of the river, rinsing her hands in the cold water. Her eyes found his. "You stayed," she said. "I always would have." She stepped toward him. "Even if I told you to run?" "I don't run from what matters." Ayasha looked up at him, the sun rising behind her. "Then stay. Not just for today." Wade reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "If you'll have me." She smiled small, certain. "I already do." And in that quiet morning light, surrounded by the sound of river and wind and distant hooves, Wade Collier no longer felt like a man passing through. He had someone to fight for, and for the first time in years, somewhere to belong.